All right, good morning and now good afternoon to some of you. Welcome to Satellite Book Club's series session number 247. My name is Dan Lindsay from NOAA NESDIS. Today's presentation is titled Understanding the Societal Impact of NOAA Satellite Data Through Economics and Value Chain Mapping, presented by Joseph Conran. Our facilitator today is Matt Foster. A few reminders before we get started. The session is being recorded. See the pinned message in the chat for the Privacy Act information. We'll be doing Q&A after the presentation as always. If you have questions, please post them in the chat. If you're interested in participating or presenting in the future rather, fill out the form that's also linked in the chat. We're always looking for more presenters. If you have any feedback on the Satellite Book Club session, please do fill out the feedback form. If you need training assistance, please contact Ross Van Til. And thank you as always to OCFO and the GEO and LEO programs for their support. So introducing today's presenter, Joseph Conran is a senior economist at NOAA on the Chief Economist Team and the Office of the Financial Officer, or OCFO, excuse me. He focuses on the value of earth science information and currently facilitates economic research for GeoXO, NEON, SWO, and NEXRAD. In addition to his role as an economist, he also supports NOAA Data Governance Committee, the U.S. Government on Geo Observations, or USGEO, and the GeoValue under the group of Earth Observations. Previously, Joe served as a decision scientist in NESDIS TIPIO on the analytical team and also spent some time in NESDIS STARS simulating hurricane data using deep neural networks. He is currently a PhD candidate in economics at American University and holds 2 master's degrees, one in computer data science and another in economics. So now I'll hand it over to Joe. Welcome to Satellite Book Club.
Thank you so much, Dan. And thank you all for attending, and hello to, I guess, my former colleagues and current colleagues that are also participating today. Next slide. So this is a canned slide, I guess we always present, but just talking about what my office does is we provide executive decision support, supporting, I guess, a lot of different levels in the agency. But basically, when you need an economic valuation and you really don't have that capacity in your office, you can come to us. Feel free to reach out, even if it is just a scoping exercise. But we help conduct economic valuations. We support market research and development. We produce evidence and statistics for the NOAA budget. We also coordinate with other agencies and within the NOAA offices. And we also provide guidance and reviews for the development of robust economic and statistical analyses. Next slide. And so what does that mean? I mean, that could be a lot of different things, but I guess especially thinking about the satellites, having Dan as the host, we do a lot of the satellite studies that go up to OMB for kind of budget prosecution and justification. Currently, we're working on the Space Weather Next program. We're working on NEON Series 1, and for that, we're supporting with our own study on atmospheric rivers. We're working with Weather Service on the NEXRAD status quo study, and I think that will become a Radar Next study in the next fiscal year. We just put out a study looking at deep sea mining as they're about to change a permitting rule for that. I guess with the change in administration, we also conducted a value of NOAA data overview, I guess providing some citable statistics for leadership. Recently, we also conducted a study on the GeoXO lightning mapper. Last year, we looked at, I guess, coastal and natural resource investments. And previously, we also looked at GeoXO ocean color and did a full analysis of the GeoXO system. Next slide. I also wanted to give a shout out, I guess, coming this fall, I'm talking about citable and defensible economic statistics. We host on the Science Council website, NOAA by the numbers, and I guess what that is I guess a menu of, I guess, talking about, I guess, NOAA's role in these different areas, but then also sharing key statistics or information from citable journal articles. So we think these are all very high quality and usable statistics. So if you want to talk about your program or phenomena, I guess it's mostly phenomena focused, but if you want to talk about these different areas, please visit the site, use the information there, and we will be updating it for this new fiscal year with more information, more subcategories, and hopefully it'll be a more usable website as well. Next slide. So talking about what I was trying to focus on is how do we value, I guess, a lot of this earth science information whether it's from an observation, a model, a product, or a service. So first, I guess we do this to align agency operation investments with the public value. I guess we're not, I mean, certain agencies are focused more on research, but we're an operational agency. So we want to make sure what we do truly connects to society. So that's kind of the key point. And I guess these studies help demonstrate how information supports the economic growth and prosperity. It's used in budget justifications, as I mentioned. Say, I guess if a system has been in place for a while, we will conduct a status quo benefit study looking at how, I guess, the current observations, say, are providing benefits. And then finally, I guess, just more generally, I guess maybe if you want to convey your information or the value, I guess, to society, we're here for that as well. Next slide. So I guess before we get into it, I just want to build some definitions. So what are economic benefits? It's the measure of welfare provided by information or service to a recipient. For us, it's the public sector. And those can be measured in different ways. We can look at economy, which is a reduction of costs, efficiency, which is optimally allocating resources, or effectiveness, which is spending on worthwhile endeavors, say the public benefit. Within NOAA, sometimes we also look at economic impacts, and that's kind of the transfer of funds from NOAA to an external, I guess, source or public sector. Think about, say, GeoXO. I guess if economic benefits, we're talking about the value of our information to, say, fire weather. Economic impact would be we spend money on a different aerospace contractor, and they build a satellite. We create jobs for that satellite sector, and then they buy parts, and that creates trickle down, I guess, spending in subsidiary sectors, and those people, because of that, now have money to spend on I don't know, food, hobbies, things like that. And so that's what economic impact looks at, is the changes in revenue, profits, wages, and spending patterns based off the money we spend on that. When we talk about economics, we usually think about dollar signs, and monetization is great because it allows for easy comparison against different public investments. But other values do exist. It could be health outcomes, well-being, security, nature preservation, whatever you might think. That any of those values could be, I guess, what we would want to evaluate. And then finally is the value of information. This is a key topic, I guess, throughout this whole presentation is what is value of information? It's the benefit of enhanced decision-making through better observations, data analysis, or communication services. Next slide. Coupling with economic analysis is user engagement. We need to understand who the users are, and that's not just within NOAA, say NES is thinking about the Weather Service. We care about the public-facing users or the experts in society that take our information and make decisions with them. And so what we ask for that is what decisions are being influenced by the information we provide, who is making those decisions, what outcomes are being improved with our information, to what degree are those outcomes improved, how many people are affected by those outcomes, are there gaps in the understanding with how our products are used or not used, and by whom? And then finally, how can our services best be improved? Next slide. There are different types of value within NOAA. So there's, I guess, for satellites and other Earth science information, I guess what's most important is the value of data, information, and decision support tools. And here we ask how information provided by NOAA enables or improves societal outcomes. And so we can look at observing systems, data processes, modeling, dashboards, etc. Say more on the ocean side or fishery side, we also care about the value of natural resources and management. So this could be measuring and monitoring the natural resources, direct management of that resource, say NERS, fisheries. We also might ask how natural resources enhance societal outcomes, say through ocean and coastal management, ocean energy and mapping, or for some of this, we also coordinate with other agencies too. Another area that's less understood is, say, the value of scientific advancement, research, and capacity building. Thinking about OAR in specific is, I mean, a lot of their work doesn't directly connect to society, or it doesn't, as obviously connect to society. It does connect to society, but some research, I guess, it's cyclical, and then I guess there's a whole measurement of research to operations. There is value there, and as we've evaluated, and I guess we've provided guidance to OAR on how to better assess this, but it's not as obvious as, say, I guess we fly a satellite and societal outcomes are improved. I guess for that, the value chains are much more complex. Next slide. And collaboration is necessary for this. I mean, we're economists, we are not the earth scientists, so we don't really understand this domain as well as you all do. So we need to coordinate with you, but these are only two parts of, I guess, a three-piece puzzle. Is that, I guess, as I was mentioning earlier, is we need those experts in society to say, yeah, we receive your information. It's amazing. This is exactly what we're looking for. Without it, our ability to perform our mission is severely degraded. So we need all three aspects: the societal experts, the physical scientists, and then the social scientists to all come together to kind of figure out what the value of a certain product or service is. Next slide. And so I guess thinking about what NOAA does, and it creates value in a lot of different ways, and it is kind of cyclical in this sense. I guess starting anywhere on this cycle is maybe start with monitoring. First, we monitor things. I guess that's a lot of what NESDIS, Weather Service, say Ocean Service does. Fisheries too. I guess everybody kind of monitors in their own way. And then I guess when phenomena or specific events occurs, we detect those. Say with a hurricane, we kind of see it being formulated, and we're saying, hey, this is something we should be looking at. And then, as say a hurricane or some other phenomena starts to occur, we begin to manage that, and maybe that is handing the information to another service, say FEMA, and they're more capable of managing. But management does occur on the ocean service side. Management occurs within the agencies. We go out, we help manage, I guess, the different ecosystems along with fisheries. And then this kind of cycles back. As once, say, a specific event occurs or an acute event, we go back to the forecasting side. Is we know this one just ended. Now, I guess, let's start looking for the next big event or next big phenomena, maybe the next new hurricane. So there is kind of a cycle to all this, and we create value at every node of this cycle. Next slide. But there is also a temporal aspect. So I mean, I kind of alluded to that in the cycle, but for acute phenomena, there's a before and after. And so I guess before the event occurs, we kind of conduct the data and research. We also build some nowcasts, and those inform defensive investments. As the event's about to occur, we kind of move from defensive investments to mitigating actions, and the forecast and nowcasts are still, I guess, key players in that. But after the kind of the event settles or passes on, we move into kind of post hoc observation. So we look at say if it's a hurricane, a disaster area, and say what has changed, how can we help people recover and get back to their lives, their businesses, what have you. And so I guess when we're thinking about the value, not just connecting that value chain, I guess, in a static way, but thinking about the temporal measurement. So when we say we're improving hurricane information, making sure we know at what lead times we're improving it, because evacuations occur, say, 48 to 72 hours in advance. So making sure we improve at a time that matters to people and not just, I guess, generally. So thinking about the temporal side is important as well. Next slide. So I've been mentioning value chains a couple of times. What is a value chain? Well, it's a series of consecutive steps that go into the creation of a product or service, from its initial design to its use and societal impact. The chain identifies each step in the process at which a value or input is added, including the data collection, the processing, the modeling, decision support, environmental response, and the societal benefit. I put, for an example, the Argo floats. They're ocean tide gauges. They connect to water surface maps. And one area they might touch upon is marine transportation. You also hear people talk about value trees. They're highly connected. Value trees made up of a lot of different value chains. A value tree, I guess I found this definition online, I should have cited it, is value decomposition of internal operation indicators for use in a multi-criteria decision-making process that connects strategic objectives to specific activities. And I kind of put a little graphical or notional comparison on the left, or at the bottom right is a value chain is just a little bit more straightforward. It's just a single thread. The value tree shows the interconnectedness or the complexity of a lot of different value chains, say with an organization like NOAA. Next slide. So for NOAA, here's a generalized NOAA value chain. On the far left, we have the observations. This could be satellites, in situ, surface observations, or it could also be humans. It might be a ecosystem researcher with a clipboard going down and just taking stock of how things are changing within that ecosystem. This could go into data ingest or pre-processing. This is where we kind of refine that, say, go from L0 data all the way up to, I don't know the highest L, so I won't, I guess. I think it's maybe L6 or L7, but yeah, we process the data and then we hand it off to, I guess, different entities, say the Weather Service, and that's where they assimilate it into their models and create numerical models, a lot of other information. And then we hand it off to forecasters or other decision support offices, and they condense that information, synthesize it, and then hand it out the door to the expert and societal users. And those experts or societal users make decisions or activities. It might be a local government deciding to evacuate, I guess, because there's a wildfire nearby. But with that information, they improve a societal outcome. Something else I want to note is at the bottom, you see this third-party ingest, is that there are capable private entities that take our information either on kind of in a raw or semi-processed manner, or maybe wait until a little bit further downstream. But they take that information and they also generate their own value-added products. And then they hand those off to expert and societal users, sometimes for free, sometimes there's a subscription or another paid service that they'll take advantage of. But it's not just us doing this, it's that we work with a lot of different other public and private entities to create these products and to benefit society. Next slide. I guess for this presentation, I was trying to, I guess, tailor it a bit to Tower S. I did a AWEB's value chain. It's notional, so please don't tear me apart if it's not quite correct. But here on we have on the left, I guess, different satellites, radar, surface analyses, soundings, and numerical weather outputs. Those all feed into AWIPS. AWIPS then, I guess, condenses and synthesizes all this information for different experts within NOAA and maybe elsewhere. I'm not certain on that. But they use that for weather warnings, hydrological products, public forecasts, marine forecasts, or aviation forecasts. And then so that goes out the door. And it benefits a lot of different societal areas. It could be disaster management, water management, energy, I guess, processing, making sure it's efficient. Could inform agriculture. I guess if you know a rainstorm is coming, maybe you water a little bit less to offset or think about flooding for your farm area. The next one I'm going to skip because it's a bad word right now. Health, ecosystems, biodiversity. Those are all, I guess, also informed. And transportation, say marine navigation, truckers on the road, things like that. Next slide. And so I guess when we're actually trying to develop these studies, we want to connect observations to impact. And so we go through and kind of follow these steps to kind of figure out how will we figure out the value of this information. So first, I guess thinking about, say, an observation, starting from that side, is what does the observing system measure? Then we identify the downstream models and direct users. From there, we ascertain the incremental value of that observing system on models and direct users. We then trace the internal data process to external facing products. We connect those external facing products to societal impacts. And then finally, we analyze how external facing products support specific societal areas. Next slide. And so some of this is, I guess, better suited. We do have offices. TIPIO, I guess, where I came from, they're really good for the blue component of this, is that they have their value tree. It's a great place to start, I guess, when we're trying to set off on a different evaluation, is understanding, I guess, the interconnectedness of a lot of the different node processes. But I guess where the TIPIO or the other, I guess, expert information kind of stops, and there, it might be there for a little bit, is once it goes out the door, that's where things become a little bit more gray. And that's where we rely on academic literature, expert elicitation. I guess I mentioned that in blue, but it also, I guess, is on the green side as well. We talk to the users and we say, how do you receive this information? I guess, what do you do with it? How does it benefit society? If we can, this is where we start to build in the monetization as well, is especially with academic literature. We look at that and say, okay, they say there's about, I don't know, 100 million in benefits for this one service that we provide. then we figure out how to kind of apply that to the value that we're looking for specifically. We call that benefit transfer. I won't get into that here, but there are a lot of different economic methods that we can conduct to take it. And sometimes there isn't much information, and when that happens, we need to kind of conduct an empirical study, and that takes about more time, maybe 2 years or so, to really get that into place. So if you are looking to kind of conduct an empirical study, come to us very early. Next slide. And so where there's a lot of complexity is ascertaining the incremental value of an observing system or other data source, say if we're looking at a model or product rather than the observing system. This is where we struggle. This is where we really need to work with the physical scientists to understand what's really impacted, and then kind of we go out the door to the societal expert and say, hey, if we improve this, what does that mean for you? But this is what we'll spend most or a lot of our time on, is this specific step. Next slide. And so how do we do that? We employ, I guess, for a lot of what we do is the value of information framework. So value of information is realized when information influences decisions on affected outcomes. So we look at one outcome and compare that against another. Here we have an outcome associated with new information, and we're comparing that against the status quo information. So say GeoXO is flying a new sounder. How much better is that new sounder versus no sounder, or sounders only in the LEO constellation? So we compare those two, and then what the value of that GeoXO sounder would be is the green box, is the value benefit of that new information. And so what the value of information is looking at is the benefit of the new information is the difference between the outcome with new information and without it. Here's a quote also, is that data have value when they are used in decision making. If not, then the economic value of such data or information is effectively zero. We like to use this. There is a little complexity with that, especially when we're talking about the value of data, say for NCEI. There is value to that data just because it's stored, but it does need to, I guess, inform something at some point, I guess, for us to kind of put an economic statistic on that. Next slide. And just to clarify, I guess what we showed on the previous slide was an ex-ante framing, is that people come to us with two different types of economic requests. It's either to value a current or status quo system, or to value, I guess, a new system. And for new systems, we take an ex-ante approach or prospective study, where we compare an improved service against a counterfactual, which is the status quo. And there we're seeing the value or benefit of that improved service. But an ex post or retrospective study is looking at a status quo system and comparing that against a degraded or no capability. So say the value of JPSS, and we compare that against a world in which there is no LEO observations. That would be this kind of ex post approach, is saying this is the value of JPSS versus not having any satellites within that JPSS constellation. And there we're looking at the value benefit of status quo information or service. Next slide. And then so this kind of gets at NOAA-wide value chains better serve end users. So this is thinking about the customer experience, or how we provide better service delivery, is that user engagement, customer experience, and service delivery strengthen NOAA internal and external value chains through user relationships to improve societal impacts. I think I saw Kat Hawley join this. I think it's Andy Lotto on the Geo side. We just lost Ellen McCrae, who was kind of one of the large proponents of service delivery. But this is something that we should be doing. It's not quite in the economic valuation wheelhouse, but we work side by side with a lot of these researchers to, I guess, both improve the services we provide, but then understand the value of those. I also want to give a call to my old office, TIPIO. NOAA is a great place to start for any valuation or service delivery study. It shows a lot of the different interconnectedness, but it also has rankings or weights for a lot of the observing systems. So if you want to know, I guess, what the key product is for the global forecast system, NOAA is a great first place to start, I guess, to see what are the inputs to that GFS, to understand, I guess, what might be the most important, or where do we want to focus for improving the GFS. For economic modeling of NOAA information, asking how do we value NOAA's information and services, and what data is needed, I guess, is the key question there. Another thing to think of that kind of ties in for economic service delivery user engagement is operations research and contribution analysis. A lot of this ties in with NOAA and the TIVIO office too, but there is a whole side, and this is more management science, but understanding the connectedness, thinking about how the value chains and user engagement are modeled to measure and enhance knowledge missions effectiveness. This is a world unto itself, especially when we're thinking about complex systems analysis. So what is the value of LEO, GEO, commercial data buys, surface observations, ocean observations, combining all that together? I would say that's something that these operations researchers are really effective in. So that is something, I guess, that I would love to see improved, I guess, within the agencies, bringing more of these experts into our world. Next slide. And so, yeah, I'm about to wrap up. These are questions that we're kind of still struggling or thinking about, I guess, is what is the value of data versus value information? I mentioned on a previous slide is that, yeah, information or data doesn't have value until it's used to inform a societal decision. But there is inherent value of data, but how do you kind of get to that? And so we'll look at how much do we spend on this? So I begin, that's kind of suggesting there's inherent value to this data. Is like, we're not doing this for no reason or just to pat ourselves on the back. We're doing it for a purpose. So rather than looking at the decisions made with it, is seeing how much are we spending on this? Why are there mandates in place? There are inherent, I guess, aspects to data. So thinking about that a bit more is other ways to kind of evaluate or think about the value of data. Secondly, most economic research that we conduct focuses on large capital investments or end-of-the-chain public-facing products. But thinking about Tower S, thinking about AWIPs, there's a lot of places in the middle of the chain that also provide a lot of value. And if they went away, we would have a degraded capability. So thinking more about those rather than just kind of focusing on the beginning and the end of the chain. That's another thing that we should do more about. Yeah, thinking about what about the data processing, the sharing, or the visualization of this information. Research, as I mentioned, that's another area that we haven't spent as much time on, but how do we value research? Especially, I guess, as we're looking to cut budgets, making sure we're not cutting research that informs key weather service products, things like that. And then last, we've heard a lot about AI recently. What is AI? Is it machine learning? Is it new algorithms? Is it migrating to the cloud? Is it generative AI? Do we have a chat agent now that kind of walks us through problems? Is that what we're trying to assess? So tearing apart, I guess, what AI is and looking at each of those components. I think that's the first step for this, but I guess wrapping our head around what is value of AI when we talk about that, that's something else we're looking at. I think that was the last slide. I think the next one just opens it up for questions. But I think we'll hand it over to Matt first.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That was my head was like spinning, listening to you talk about that and thinking about the complexities in valuing our products, services, observing platforms. It's really kind of a fascinating topic. So thank you for joining us today to educate us about this a little bit. Before we get to audience questions, by the way, if anyone out there has any questions, just pop them in the chat and we'll pick them up there. First, a couple of friendly reminders. In order for everybody to best view Joe and myself, go under the settings in the Google Meet, under Adjust View, set the layout to tiled, and be sure and toggle on the hide tiles without video settings so your display isn't cluttered with all those. Also, be sure and check back with us next week for the next in the series of the Satellite Book Club sessions. If you have any questions about the SBC or satellite products in general, contact Sheila Kupai from the Tower S team. And now let's see if I see some things have been popped into the chat here. Dan says, one thing we often struggle with is quantifying the value of data that's used qualitatively. A good example is geoimagery. Forecasters look at it frequently. In fact, we just found in some statistics we grabbed, almost constantly they're looking at it, and it's helped in decision making. But how do we quantify how much that improves forecast, watch, warning accuracy, or how much ultimately does it save the taxpayers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complex because, I mean, it's not, I know Valerie Ware is on the call as well. So this is an area that she focuses on a lot, is understanding exactly what the forecaster uses to make the decision. And it might change. And I know AWIPS, I think you now have the ability to kind of track what people are pulling up when they issue the forecast. I think that's going to be perhaps a smoking gun, or maybe not the smoking gun, but a smoking gun for kind of assessing that value. I mean, is it qualitative? I guess in what way? Because I think there is. I mean, I guess you would have to find a measurement, and maybe it's the time used or time on screen. But figuring out, I guess, how we look at that. I guess if people look at one model or one map the most often, I would say that's probably the most significant input. The TIPIO team, I think they also conduct expert meetings where they say, what are your key inputs for developing this one product that goes out the door? So it is qualitative, but there are methods, and this is where social science, I think, especially shines, is that they're able to take those, I guess, that qualitative information and put it into a quantitative context. So I'd be happy to look or work more with you, Dan, if that is a question. But yeah, Ji-Sun Lee, I think, is the main contact in Weather Service for the Office of Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences. And yet I think Valerie's on the call too. But yeah, feel free to reach out to any of them. They're probably the best suited for answering those questions.
Great. As you were answering there, just something that popped in my head. Of course, we have our discrete official products, tornado warnings, hurricane warnings, winter storm watches, whatever it may be. But a lot of emphasis in the last several years has been on impact-based decision support services, or IDSS, which is really kind of, it's hard to quantify. Is that a product, a service? It's really kind of a service, because I guess service is in its name. Has anyone ever asked you to put a value just generally on IDSS that the Weather Service provides?
We haven't, I guess, communicated out the door, but it is something we have considered. I mean, for valuing satellites, everything, knowing that final portal that goes out the door. I mean, what I'm thinking of is HurEvac is a great platform. I guess we're thinking about hurricane evacuations. I would say that's IDSS. I don't know if you consider that. But yeah, I think having that information, I guess, for the emergency manager makes things a lot better, much more easily to digest and, I guess, make decisions upon. We haven't, I guess, looked at that specifically. It hasn't been asked to us, but that is something, I guess, that we would love to look more at. Yeah,
that'd be really interesting. On that complexity slide you showed right there at the end, you talked about the challenge of valuing services, and maybe this is a little bit of a selfish question, because I'm part of Tower S, but how do you get started in valuing services like the Tower S team provides?
Yeah, and I mean, for that, I guess what I would first ask is, what is Tower S and what do you do? I mean, I know you hand information from NESDIS to Weather Service essentially, but yeah, getting that full list of products. And I guess the other question is this a status quo study or is it ex ante study? Because I know, like, AWIPS, say, migrating to the cloud. That's perhaps a new capability. And so are you asking about the value of that cloud migration, or are you saying just the general value of AWIPS as is? So thinking about whether it's an ex ante or ex post study is another question. But then finally is building the counterfactual, is what are you comparing this against? So yeah, once you have that list of products and saying, if Tower S didn't exist, would Weather Service not react to this information? Would they look elsewhere? How much less capable would their forecasts or other, I guess, information that goes out the door to those experts be without Tower S. I'm sure there would be huge degradation. I'm sure a lot of satellite data products would just not be used as effectively if you all weren't there. So I think it's an essential service. But yeah, wrapping your head around what Tower S does, who receives that information, I guess both internal, so yeah, to Weather Service, and then kind of measuring at the end, I guess, what that expert or societal outcome is how I'm just thinking about it like quickly. That's how I would start.
I find that all really interesting, and just a reminder again for the audience, pop any questions you have in the chat there, and we'll pass them on to Joe. Talking about the complexities in doing all this, and you mentioned it was in, I can't remember what the title of the slide was, but it was where you had down at the bottom in green, and you mentioned how the valuing the societal impacts is, you have that as one box in that chain, but then you kind of alluded to how incredibly complex that could be, and I started thinking about, if you have some kind of disaster, a fire, hurricane, whatever, and then you get into the recovery efforts, and then there's all this money being spent on the recovery efforts, and that's contributing to employment, and there are a lot of it's just a maze of rabbit holes you can go down with this. Can you give us some feeling of, it seems like it could be almost infinite when you start getting into that. Where is the line drawn when you start trying to value those societal impacts?
Yeah, so an economist, we love using Latin terms. So I guess what we always say is ceteris paribus, is holding all else equal, is where you start. So I guess you figure out, what you're trying to measure, and you keep as much of everything, at a constant otherwise, so that you can kind of tease out the signals. I mean, it's kind of a regression or a statistical approach, is saying, yeah, I would say with new GeoXO, we changed that, so that's kind of the independent variable, and the dependent variable would be the societal outcome. So yeah, changing as little as possible. But then what you're saying, there are complexities, is that people react differently. But then starting with that simple framework and then building in the more complexities, is like, will the population change? With this information, maybe people will start moving. Maybe they realize living on the coast or living next to a forest is perhaps not the best. I see that now because of this new imager that they're flying. So there might be other reactions that they have that also change. The wildfire management is like, oh yeah, with this, we have a better, NDVI, the vegetation index. So we can kind of see where a lot of the fuel is. So we're going to manage that better. So we don't have to worry about emergency response as much. That's all hypothetical. I don't know if that's actually the case for anything, but there are so many complexities. But thinking about exactly what you're trying to assess, and then, I know we have offices like OAR's Weather Program Office, and they fund research. So bringing our office in for kind of those budget studies, but then funding upfront research to think about the complexities, I think is the way to go, so that we can kind of take those studies when the time comes, look at them and say, oh, that's great, that's a really good complexity to think about. We'll build that into our analysis, so that you do have those complexities. We are evolving and our understanding, improving it. But then also, when we just have to do something a little bit more straightforward, or not, there's nothing straightforward, but something we've done before at least, we're ready for it. So yeah, I think upfront investment in research is kind of the key for thinking about those complexities.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, and like I said, I find all this really fascinating. Michael popped a question in the chat here that he echoed my comments. Great presentation. He said, "Is it not true that in conducting NOAA TPIO goes out and interviews forecasters, for example, and actually derives quantitative percentages for the weights they put on GOES imagery for different products?"
Yes, that is true. They build, it's a very structured elicitation process. believe they first go to the mission managers and say, what products do you generate? So it is, all the information is there, is ratified by the line offices. And then they go down to the SMEs themselves and they say, hey, these are the products your bosses say that you create. Is this true, first of all? If so, what are the data inputs to them? And can you rate your satisfaction with each of those data inputs? And so they'll provide kind of a rank ordering of, I guess, what are the key inputs? And then from that, you can understand, I guess, what goes in, but then also what services can we improve? If, say, one source they rank pretty highly, but they have a low satisfaction for it, I would say that's an area for investment. So yeah, the TIPIO does collect all that information. I don't want to mischaracterize because it's been a few years since I've been there, but yeah, they do have a great resource for that. Yeah, good talking to you, Jammer.
Great. Well, I think we have just a few more minutes here, and you mentioned engaging with the people who are providing the services, and you talked about JPSS a little bit, and of course the polar orbiters, one of their key value is input to the forecast model. So do the modelers do you have them, or do they already do like sensitivity studies on the models to say that sort of scenario where what would happen to the model if we didn't have this, or how much might it improve if we got this much higher resolution data, or whatever it might be. How does the modeling community fit in when you're looking at a new POSE observing system?
Sure. And so I mean, this is where observing system experiments and simulated experiments, I think, come in handy. If those are crafted in a way that connect to societal outcomes, or involve decisions or time periods that connect to societal outcomes, thinking about an Aussie, say, for hurricanes, is that, I mean, as long as you model the improvement at the hours that matter for decisions, that's how, I mean, that would be the ideal state, is that, and I know that's what Cat Hawley is doing for NEON Series 1, is that they have two Aussies kind of connected to societal outcomes. So that is the ideal. But if you do not have Aussie information, first you start with, say, the satellite or data experts and they'll tell you, I guess, with this, there'll be new channels. And that is another thing. I mean, Aussies won't always have everything that you're looking for, but understanding what the improvements are. So say with SIMBA, which is the NEON Series 1 instrument, there will be more channels, I think, at the water vapor level. And I think there will be expanded channels generally. So there's higher resolution in the bands, and then more around areas that matter for, say, water vapor. So then thinking about what does that mean? I guess if we have a better idea of what the water vapor, who could use that information? Obviously, it's focused around precipitation, but maybe it's also atmospheric rivers that could benefit from that. Then you would find, I guess, those experts say, I think it's the physical sciences lab, atmospheric river observatories. You would talk to them and say, hey, NEON is proposing, I guess, this new microwave sounder that's going to have a lot more channels. What does that mean to you? And they're like, oh, with that, we can kind of better understand or characterize the atmospheric river environment, so that we can better build a forecast. And then I think the tricky part, though, is then kind of connecting that to society. So saying, okay, with that improved, I guess, atmospheric river forecast, what does that mean for the societal user, the farmer, the water resource manager? It might mean nothing. You might have to get, I mean, and this is where there might be a punctuated improvement, is that you improve it a little, nothing happens. You keep improving it, all of a sudden the societal value jumps up. So that is another thing to consider, is that there are a lot of complexities along the way. But yeah, I think so. First, starting with the observing side or the data side, and then connecting to the expert and talking to them, basically ground truthing everything all along the way.
Yeah, we did get. Let's see here. We've gotten a couple more questions in the chat. Lewis Cantrell asks, AI or large language models have access to massive corpus of information. How risk averse is your office to tap into that resource to identify which NOAA products and services are relevant to external decision making?
I mean, we're not risk averse at all. I mean, we've been using Gemini, hopefully as much as everybody else is. I guess the quality is sometimes dubious. And so we rely on academic literature for the most part or the experts themselves. So we are conducting our own interviews, but it is a great first pass. So I've done it. So I guess with a lot of these different studies, I think for the lightning mapper, we had to think about bullseye detection. I didn't know anything about kind of defense uses. Gemini provided me some information and resources that I could actually review to better understand that kind of problem area. So yeah, I think it's great as a first step, but it should not be the final step. I think a lot of things need to be reviewed and verified on your own, given your training or background.
Okay. One last question here out of the chat. I think this is a great question because the Weather Service in the past several years has been really focusing on how do we better get our message and products to more underserved communities. And it was asked here, how do you or can we quantify the missed value when end users are unable to effectively interface with the data?
And so, I mean, this is kind of, I mean, we're putting on the users then to, I guess, kind of connect it, but I would start with the societal area. So rather than tracing the value chain outward from the observation to society, think about the societal situation, say a disaster, hurricane disaster, and trace that back. And so we're saying, I guess for that, maybe there's one data stream we think is great for, I guess, hurricane management or mitigation response, but nobody's using it. Asking, I guess, from the societal perspective, what are they using and why are they using? And I think this is that service delivery approach. And I think there is still hopefully a publication on our website. I think it's service delivery framework for water management. That would be a great document to look at, but basically saying, this is what people are using. We think we have a service. Why aren't people using that? And it could be tabletop exercises that kind of suss out what the problem is. But I think ultimately it's that, I guess, we're not providing an effective service. It might be the communication layer that we're not putting on a website or in a digestible manner. But maybe people just don't know about it. So maybe it's an advertising issue. But yeah, but identifying the problem is like, so first, yeah, identifying, I guess, what the problem, or I guess the data stream we think we have, but then back tracing it from society to us and figuring out where that mismatch is or that misalignment. I think that's probably how I would start with that.
All right, great. Well, once again, Joe, this has been a fascinating presentation and dive into, because forecasters, I know, always think about, kind of those direct protection of life and property impacts, but it's interesting to see how your team is kind of putting a dollars and cents aspect to it. So thank you again for taking the time to join us, and I'll turn it back over to Dan to wrap it up.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I echo Matt's comments. Excellent presentation, Joe, and a really nice discussion, and good job, Matt, with facilitating that. So thanks everybody for joining. This concludes today's Satellite Book Club. Tune in next week for the next installment. Thanks.